We are starting unit 13 of the Morenu Shmita units for the Menucha of surnamed Danger Sur Moshe Fiore. We started learning the whole story of transactions and sales when it comes to, as it applies to Perot Shvit in the previous unit, unit 12. Now we're starting unit 13. And we have the famous Braita that tells us the whole procession of how Kedusha Shvit passes from one thing to another. Let's read it quickly from the Gemara in Sukkah Daf Mem. Shvit tofes demah shneimar ki ovel hi kodesh tiyeh lachem ma kodesh tofes demav ve'asur av shvit tofes demah ve'asura. So both remain, meaning the first item remains kadosh, and yet the kedusha moves on. Is that what happens by kodesh? Not quite. That's the next line. A ma kodesh tofes demav yotze lechulin. When I sell kodesh, it's no longer kodesh. Av shvit tofes demav yotze lechulin. So kioveli kodesh tihye. It's holy and shall remain holy. It's holy in the sense that the Kedusha passes from one item to another. Question is, what is the most fundamental definition of the word Kodesh? According to this Gemara, the most fundamental definition is something that when you sell it, its transcendent attributes pass on to the next item. Right? You agree? That's what it says here. Interesting. הכיצד? לקח בפירות שביעית בשר, אלו ואלו מדברים בשביעית. לקח בבשר דגים, יצא בשר נכנסו דגים. לקח בדגים יין, יצא דגים נכנס יין. נכנס יין, יצא סוד. סתם. לקח יין, שמן, זה משחק. לקח ביין שמן, יצא יין, נכנס שמן. הכיצד? אחרון נכנס בשביעית, ופרי עצמו אסור. So the first original Shmita fruit always remains kadosh. And the fruit at the other end, or whatever it is at the other end, remains kadosh as well, receives kedusha as well. I told you, I used to find it hard to remember, but it's very, very simple. The person who sold the perot shvi'it is the one who gets stuck with the kedusha. I sell fruit, I receive money, the money is kadosh. I buy whatever I buy with that money, what I get in exchange is kadosh. I'm the one who always remains with that. I can go through 6 different things, items. Lo mashane. The kedusha remains by me. Now, why don't? Now, the first question we're going to ask is about the second part of this braita. Kodesh tofes demav yotze lechulin. What happens to kodesh? You sell it, and it's no longer kadosh. Why does Shmita fruit remain kadosh? Even after I sell it, the kedusha is passed on anyway. So why does it remain kadosh? In a sense, it's more like tmura, but also not. So that's not other stuff, right? Why is it that there the guf has kedusha as opposed to by kodesh? I agree. That's you're saying is descriptive and not necessarily explain why exactly. So the Rav suggested two differences. נראה שההבדל בין הקדש לשביעית בדין פרי ראשון שהקדש יוצא לחולין ולא שביעית ומשום שהקדש חל בקדושת פה. What created the kedusha? You took an animal and said this is now kadosh. What created the kedusha on the fruit? Its existence, right? It grew during Shmita, whatever, right? That's made it kadosh, right? Since I didn't put the kedusha on it, I also can't remove the kedusha either. Kedusha ba'ah me'elai ina mitchalet ma'pri rishon le'olam. Achiluk and pri rishon is the same thing. Why is it that everything else in the sequence loses the kedusha? Because that I created, I moved the kedusha to there. But the original fruit is kadosh because it exists. By the way, I think this touches on a bit to the question of, is the hefker of the perot shvi'it something automatic, or is it something that I need to bestow, right? I need to mafkir, or is it already mufkar, right? The more I understand it as something that's already mufkar, I say this is just naturally Hashem came and makdish this. I don't have the right to change anything. If I have to mafkir, and we learned about the relationship between the hefker and the kedusha, right? Then there's more room to say I do have a part in the story, right? So he says it's just It's noticeable because the next sentence he says, בכך שקדושת פרי ראשון בשביעית חלה מאלה מן השמיים. So, just remind me of the. So that's the first chiluk. I'm skipping the second paragraph. שפדיון דברים קדושים יש שתי הלכות. דין קניין ודין תפיסת דמים. Because here's the thing. Who owns the Hekdesh? Who owns the Hekdesh? What? I'm not trying to be too clever here. I'm keeping this simple. Yes, it's a great philosophical question. I agree, but that smile, that's what he meant. The big philosophical question: who owns the Hekdesh? But to keep it simple, who owns the Hekdesh? You could say Hashem, or you could say Reshut Hekdesh. There is a certain ownership that owns the Hekdesh. There are two ways of thinking about Hekdesh in general. You could say I'm bestowing transcendence to this animal by when I say it's Kadosh. Or I say I'm giving it to a certain entity, right? Entity happens to be right, so I can give it to Rav, I can give it to Philip, I can give it to the Kodesh, to Reshut HaKadosh. So once I buy it, what I'm doing there is buying it from that entity called Hekdesh. Mimela, it's no longer theirs. If it's no longer theirs, it's also not Kadosh. But by Shvit, there's no such thing. So by Hekdesh, why is the Kedusha removed by Hekdesh? Because someone owns it, someone being the world of Hekdesh, Hashem, Gizbar, whatever it is, but the Kodesh is not only this transcendent attribute, it's also an ownership thing. So if I change the ownership, as opposed to Shmita fruit, there's nothing to do with anyone's ownership. Adrabah, no one owns it initially. Then I take it, so now I own it. And still Kadosh. It's not that I sell Tarafi. Still Kadosh. Nothing changed. So, those are the two explanations Rav Soloveitchik proposes. Rav Blumentzweig takes a deeper dive into the first aspect of who bestows the Kedusha. Rav Blumentzweig Mori Verabi. Rav Blumentzweig writes on page 2 here. האחרונים תלו זאת בהבדל במקור הקדושה. תשובה זו של האחרונים מעט קשה. In the second line there. גם קדושת נטע רבעי ונטע רבעי חלה מאליה ללא פעולת אדם, בכל זאת אדם יכול להפקיע אותה לגמרי. Right? נטע רבעי, we see there are other things that do come on their own, right? Like the fourth year, the fruit has some kind of kedusha. You have to eat it in Yerushalayim. Who created that? Hashem created that, right? So why does the chilul work there? G'jata ketuv. Tough, thanks. What's the? Oh? יש קושי מסוים בהגדרת הפרות כקדושים. What makes them קדוש? במה הדבר מתבטא? הם לא אסורים לזרים. אפשר לאכול אותם טומאה. הקדושה באה לידי ביטוי בתפיסת דמים. So this is an interesting thing. קודש תהיה לכם. I asked before, what is the most fundamental attribute of קודש? So you should have said, you can't eat it when you're tameh, you can't feed goyim, you can only eat if you're a Kohen or a Levi or whatever, right? Which of those the Shmita fruit have? None of them. Only one thing. That if you sell it, the transaction maintains the Kedusha. But what is the Kedusha? So it must be that in this context, Kedusha kashur liyud. הם מיועדים לשימוש מסוים, ייעוד זה עומד בבסיס האיסורים השונים. חלל הפסד, חלל סחורה, איסורים אינם עומדים בפני עצמם כאיסורי כלאיים, אלא עם תוצאה של הייעוד, לא אוכלה. אמנם נראה שאין להסתפק בכך, והשימוש בלשון קדושה מלמד על נקודה עמוקה של שיוך הפירות לקדוש ברוך הוא, שבתר שבת להשם. השביעית שייכים באופן בסיסי להשם. הפירות של האכילה הוא האופן בו הותר לאדם להשתמש בהם. לעומת זאת, פירות נטע רבעי שייכים באופן בסיסי לאדם, אלה שרובצת על גבי מצוות אכילה לפני השם. פירות הלוואי אפשר לקחת את הייעוד ולקיים אותו בפירות אחרים, ואילו בשביעית אין שום דרך להרחיב את השימוש בפירות האלו מעבר לייעוד שמאפשר לנו הקדוש ברוך הוא. Meaning, when it comes to קדושת שביעית, what is the קדושה? קדושת שביעית. It's what is the purpose of this fruit. The purpose of this fruit is to eat in a certain way. Mimela, that purpose can't be taken away. It's kind of, my understanding is kind of a fuch al-fuch. If we talk about some kind of transcendent attribute, so maybe that could be moved around. But if the Kedusha is not referring to a transcendent attribute, it's referring to, what's the word for Yehud? Purpose, but there's, why? A designation, correct. If there's just a certain designation, it's designated for, right, being eaten in a certain way. So now you sold it, so what? Or does that change anything? There's no attribute to change, it's just, right? Ironically, I think of it a bit like Gavra and Chefza, which is kind of funny in this context. It goes the other way around. It's more full from what you can think. If it's an attribute in the fruit, so I say there's a Chefza that has Kedusha, Chefza could be moved around, it could be sold, it could be moved, it could be, right? So the Ravai is the Kedusha b'Chefza, it has to be in Yerushalayim, the Chefza, so you could switch it. You could say, no, this Chefza, that Chefza. Perot Shvit, because the Kedusha refers not to an attribute in them, but to a designation, it's on you. So you sell it. It's still on you. I'm mechuyav to eat it the way you eat Perot Shvit. Now, then you sell it. So what? Or does that change anything? It's still, since the chiyuv is on you, the more it's bagavra, the more it's on you to, right? The Jews are obligated to eat it in a certain way, the harder it will be to remove that kedusha. Yeah, exactly. To shake it. Shake it? To shake it? Yeah.